Okay, we're going to go ahead and start. Bertoli, would you open us in prayer?
Sure. Hi, good morning. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to CalTPA 2 workshop. We're glad you can be here. Today, to give you a preview of today, we're going to do a walkthrough of what to expect in CalTPA 2. We know that many of you have submitted or at least registered for CalTPA 1 or are about to submit. And so CalTPA 2, there's a lot of similarities. So in that sense, you have a basis of prior knowledge to work from. But then in instructional cycle 2, there are some new elements, and we're going to walk through them today. And so you might see a lot of us just kind of reading from the PowerPoint slides just to reinforce what's going on. We will try not to rush through it because, for me, myself, when I first heard these presentations months ago, after the first one, my brain was full and I said, oh my goodness, I don't even know if I can do this. But the more I hear it, the more I read it, it's like, okay, wait a second, I understand this. I can chunk it, I can take this information and compartmentalize it and connect it to what I already know. And so what I'm saying is that if you feel overwhelmed today, you're not alone. And so, but the more we review it, the more you allow yourself to process this and think about it, the better you're going to be able to understand it and then feel better about your ability to complete the tasks for instructional cycle 2. So I'd like to get us started in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we would just like to thank you for blessing us with today. We'd like to thank you for blessing us with an opportunity to gather together amongst ourselves and with each other as we look to see investigate this assessment that will allow us to not only provide feedback on our teaching ability, but let us further dive deep into what it means to really work with students in different capacities of both lesson planning and assessment. We just ask you, Lord, that you bless our time together today and that you open our hearts and minds as we dive into this topic. In your name we pray. Amen.
Okay, well, we're going to get started. As we go, we have a little bit of technology in the room that will pick up your side conversations pretty well. So if you could keep those to a minimum until there's an opportunity, we're going to have you talk together and explore some of the resources that are available to you. But otherwise, if you could keep those to a minimum, that would help. And as far as questions go, we're going to answer some questions about CalTPA 1 at the very end of this presentation, or if you'd like, so that we don't take other people's time who don't have those questions, since the focus is the second cycle for today. But all through, if you have questions or comments or need clarity, just raise your hand. And then we learned from last time, some people were a little bit intimidated about the video recording and were hesitant to ask questions. So up here on the board, if you want to just write a question up, you're welcome to do that as well. And then we'll go back to them. And online, there's a chat.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, so you guys can chat in a question, and that'll be read out to us, to the whole group. Questions benefit all of us, so I'm hesitant to ask. So we're going to delve in. Basically, this instructional cycle 2 does exactly what we did before, which is to do the entire instructional cycle, plan for lessons. You're going to be teaching and assessing students' knowledge during and after lessons. You're going to reflect on how that went and apply your new knowledge. So it's the same cycle. And again, these are things that you're doing in your classes, with your class right now. You're teaching a series of lessons and assessing students. So hopefully it's just going to capture what you're already doing. You just need to kind of be intentional about writing about what you're doing and why you're doing it that way. So it's a little bit different from the last one. The emphasis for this cycle is on assessment. And so we're going to chat a little bit about what that assessment looks like. But there should be 3 kinds of assessments. Oh, I forgot to say something. If you would please, I emailed you yesterday, I think, a link to the online platform, but also the slides. If you download the slides onto your computer, if you have one, then some of the links and things are live there. You can follow along. So you don't have to necessarily write much down, I don't think. But the 3 kinds of assessments are informal assessments, student self-assessment is important, and then formal assessment. So all 3 of those are going to be reflected in your lessons this time around, okay? So an informal assessment, as most of you already know, is kind of that assessment that you do on the fly while you're teaching. And as you're asking clarifying questions, you're checking for understanding, you're asking students to do like a follow-up after the group or turn and talk and answer questions. Here's some examples. You might be taking notes during your lecture to see how many students are paying attention, seem to be getting it, collecting student responses perhaps, looking at student and group reflections on how they're doing in something you've assigned them to do. So these are not necessarily graded items, but they give you an idea of what the student can do. It could be that whiteboard that they have to show you that is, oh, this is how I solved this problem and what answer they got for that math problem. Any of those kind of things in the moment, warm-ups, homework, exit tickets, all of those are the informal kind of assessments, just to give you a basis of, are we all tracking together? Who need a little extra support? Oh, I need to go over that concept again, and you're making those decisions right in the moment. So those are all the informal assessment strategies.
So, sorry, go ahead.
The student self-assessment, it should be embedded as well. So these are feedback that the student is giving about their own performance. What they're learning is how comfortable they are with that, and they're reflecting on their own learning. So they a rubric that the student is doing. It could be a fist to 5. It could be some sort of oral feedback given to you about how they're feeling about the content.
So even students with moderate severe disabilities can provide an idea of how they feel they're doing within a lesson. Their rubric might look a little different. It might be just 2 choices or 3 choices, but we want you to think creatively on how they can provide feedback to you, how they feel that they're doing. So it's going to vary depending on the level of the ability of your students.
Yeah. It could be something as simple as, this is easy, this is hard, thumbs up, thumbs down, that sort of thing. Yes?
Is this like a whole group type of focus, or are we doing like focus students like we did for Cycle 1?
So here we're not doing for the same focus students, it's really whole group. You are getting down to 3 different students though, but that's after your whole group instruction. We'll get to that. So you are going to give some examples from 3 students, but throw out the previous criteria because it's different from that. Right? And then your formal assessment is how are you going to collect after your series of lessons if the students are getting this material, if how they're performing on toward the objective that you're shooting for. So you're going to be collecting and analyzing student assessment to check their level of achievement. The informal assessment is going to then drive your next step of instruction, right? So how will you use that information to help you make decisions about future learning goals? You're going to be providing detailed feedback to the student about their achievement and how close they are to meeting that goal, or if they've surpassed it. You're going to be turning in or formulating a rubric of some sort or scoring criteria. And I should interject here because this could sound like you're creating a whole lot. you don't necessarily need to be creating an assessment. This assessment can be the assessment that is built into your curriculum for math, English, language arts, or whatever. Or you may take part of it and do a quiz. It doesn't have to be the summative assessment for a unit. It could be a shorter assessment to give you some information. Just if you are using your curriculum-based assessment materials, then you're citing that. And if you're adapting it, you're indicating how you're adapting it for some of the students in the room. But you certainly can use lessons, and you can use the assessments that's built into your curriculum that you're using.
So it could be formative assessments that lead up to a summative assessment. You don't necessarily have to use the summative assessment at the end of a unit.
Right.
It could just be intermittent formative assessments and how students are doing.
Right, because this is you're going to be showing 3 lessons essentially. So if I'm doing 3 lessons that are pretty sequential, that probably isn't going to be enough to do a summative assessment anyway. All right, and you don't have to have a formal assessment for every single lesson, but I would say for the end of those 3 lessons, I would do some sort of formal assessment. Now, during each of the lessons that you're preparing, you're writing in how you're going to do an informal and student self-assessment. Those I would include in each lesson, okay? And then a single formative lesson. That makes sense? Okay. Yeah, and so it says it could be your.
Are there any questions regarding this one?
Yes, sir.
So we're doing 3 actual lessons, like separate lessons?
You're writing them up. I'll show you the template. So
Okay.
yes, it's 3 lessons. Embedded in those are these assessment pieces. Okay, and then after your formative assessment, you're going to be analyzing your class results and then designing either a reteach or an enrichment kind of lesson. So actually it's 4 lessons.
Well, I mean, yeah, technically it's 4 because your instructional cycle 1, they just want you to focus on 1 lesson, and this is a series of instruction. So for them, that means 3 lessons. At the end of those 3 lessons, you're going to get feedback from your whole class based on your formative assessment. And then you'll get into this, we'll get into this a little bit later. Then you look at how your class overall did on your series of instructions, your 3 lessons, based on the information you got from your assessments. And then you're going to make another decision on what you're going to do after that. Lee? Okay.
Great. All right. So I'd like you to take some time right now to just think about, in the course of your instruction so far and what you've seen from your mentors or your master teachers, what are some informal student self-assessment and formal or formative assessments that you have used already that you think you might be using in the future in your future lessons? So go ahead, at this point, go ahead and turn and talk to someone who's near you. Yes?
Just to clarify, we're going to do a informal and a student self-assessment each lesson.
I would, yes.
And then we only need 1
Yeah.
formative or formal assessment.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
If you used a technically like an exit ticket during your last TPA, do you think it would be better to do something that's different, or is it okay to do the same?
I think it's fine to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so chat, brainstorm.
Sorry, we had one more
Okay.
question.
Are you doing 1 video recording then, or 3?
Yeah, you're doing 1 video recording, and you're going to break it up into different segments as you did for instructional cycle 1. Technically, you're actually going to do 4 because you're going to film 1 lesson, then you're going to get a bunch of information based on your assessments, and then deciding on what you're going to do for that next lesson, you're going to videotape how you did something different or how you took it to a next level.
Should these lessons be separate days then?
Mhm.
Theoretically, yeah. So,
Okay.
and remember, lessons could be
once.
lessons can be done over. A lesson doesn't have to be done in 1 day. A lesson can be done over a couple days. So the series of instruction could theoretically be more than 3 days. I mean, because but your lesson that you're videotaping, theoretically for the benefit of this environment or this assessment should be in one period if you're a single subject, or in one day if you're multiple subject or ed specialist.
If I was doing this, I would probably record everything and then use what was best. So, yeah.
That was, you kind of answered my next question
Yeah.
was, once we film everything and we're selecting the clips that show specifically what they want us to title them, what do you call them, annotate them?
Yes,
Yeah.
right.
If, let's say for my 3 lessons, I really have like great clips from lesson 2 and lesson 3 and they're hitting those annotation titles, can I use the clips for maybe like 2 of the lessons if like I didn't necessarily like how it turned out in one of the lessons or something?
I think that's gonna get clearer as we get to that section where it talks about videotaping. But my understanding would be as long as that's a 5-minute unedited clip, you can use it for wherever in your,
Wherever it is.
yeah.
Okay, thank
And
you.
then just link it for the evaluator, this is found in lesson, in the second lesson or
Okay.
whatever. I
So
would help them.
to build on that,
Yeah.
let's just say, because you have to film your opening,
Yes.
and let's say you film all 3 lessons, and all 3 of your openings are a little bit different, but wow, you really hit this and this opening and that opening and this opening. You can't cut,
Yeah.
cut, and then here's all my openings. No, it's just, it's not a best of.
Got it.
It's choose your best opening that you did and, use that one.
Okay, that makes sense.
So we encourage you to view yourself on the videotape, before you videotape yourself again, to say, oh, I really liked what I did, or I didn't like that, and I didn't notice that I, always do this when I talk, So it's kind of informative that way, and so, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so brainstorm a little bit about what types of assessments you're comfortable with and share with someone else in the room your ideas. I'll give you a couple minutes to do that. Thank you. All right, some great conversations going on, but I want to get your attention back so that we can share some of those ideas out. Anyone have an idea that they want to share to the entire group for the benefit of all? Just something that they thought, well, these are our ideas. so we get a little broader range of possibilities.
I'll start out.
Okay,
Okay.
go ahead.
So what if I'm in PE and I do an informal assessment? There really is not a lot of writing utensils
Right.
on the blacktop or in the gym or on the grass. And so I might need to have something myself when I ask informally, so how did everyone get this? I can have a general gist of maybe 30 people really got it, 20 people really didn't, but then I would have to have an understanding of who did that. So, could I have them raise their hands and take a picture of them so then I could look back later on and say, okay, which individual students? Because, our brains, we're not going to remember everything unless we have, photographic memories. But so you got to think about how, because you could do informal assessments in PE or just in a large venue, but then how do you capture that information and then be able to utilize that even the next hour? Because within the next hour, you're going to think back, okay, who had their hand raised? So how are you going to capture that information? What do you need to have on your possession? Or do you hand out little paper slips to everyone in PE, and then they give you like a little post-it note, did you get it, did you not get it, do you want more information? So think creatively how you can do that. As people come in, do you hand them a little slip, and then their exit ticket is that they have indicated somehow, some way, so that takes a lot of preparation on your hand. Do I have 185 pencils, for your PE class? Do I have 185 little slips of paper? So
Yeah, it's a good idea. Sometimes I would just kind of use the information not specific to students, like these 3 students don't have it, but what percentage of my students have it. Or I'd say if as long as the students are comfortable saying I don't have this down yet, I still need a little more practice, which is built in the culture of your classroom, then it would be like, if you still need some practice, come on forward with me so we can go over this this technique one more time. Or line up here if you got it, we're going to practice something else. If you still need some practice, come on over here. And then you actually work with that group for a few minutes to provide support. In math, we did that a lot because students pretty often had a clear idea if they understood how to do the problems or not. And so we'd be doing instruction, and then I'd ask that, and people who were like, yes, I got it, I'd say, great, then you're going to begin on this assignment. If you get stuck anywhere, come back up. And the students who didn't have it were going to stay with me, and we're going to do a little more practice. And remember that sort of gradual release of, we do it together, I'm going to model it, we do it together, and then you're going to do it by yourself. They were able to leave once they figured out they could do it by themselves. So, with math that's kind of clear. With PE sometimes that's pretty clear too. Like I'm not getting this ball where it needs to get, or I'm not doing that technique correctly. So it's yes or no often too. So any other ideas? That was a great question though, especially on the field.
who used whiteboards before for an informal assessment? What's your feeling regarding those?
Are you talking about the whiteboards?
Yeah, individual whiteboards, yeah.
Individual whiteboards.
Well, okay, so I liked it because it gave me an overall view of how many students understood what we were discussing.
Yep.
Versus how many maybe needed a little extra help, and it allowed me to actually go to them and ask. But this is still effective for those that needed that extra support without doing a whole lesson dedicated to just basically without one student. So yeah, the whiteboards I felt worked for the most part.
They're wonderful in math, especially. So
Yeah.
it's like turn and show it to your partner. Did you get the same answer? If not, let's figure out where your answers are different, especially if they're working out the
Would that
problem.
be considered a student self-assessment? They do it like in the chapters.
That's probably more of still probably an informal assessment you're kind of using peers, but you're still there. I don't know, for math, I probably did that, raise your hand if you got it, or thumbs up if you're feeling confident or not confident yet. But, yes.
My question is about that, because when I think about self-assessment, that seems more like that metacognitive, like reflective, how am I learning, doing on my learning. Is that correct? Is that kind of what they'll be looking for more?
Yeah.
Okay, instead of, okay.
It's kind of like their own personal KWL. What do I know? What do I want to know? And maybe, why would a student want to know anything? They're going to have that attitude. But, what did I learn? And so that's that L, We want students to be engaged. We want students to want to learn. We want students to be, excited about every single subject. We know that's not always the reality. But then we're trying to capture for that student self-assessment, that L part of the KWL. Where do they feel that they are? And so in terms of your planning, in terms of getting to know your class and stuff like that, have you incorporated any of that into your lesson where they start beginning that metacognitive thinking about where they are within this domain and moving forward?
So I'm in a second grade class, I've only been there 2 weeks, but I already know from like when I've done just little lessons that if I say, give me a thumbs up if you get it, they'll be like, and I look at their paper and the majority of them don't get it. So what are some other strategies that I could use that would maybe be a clear, help them self-assess and not just give me a thumbs up because they want to give me a thumbs up.
Yeah. So you're gonna have to teach that for sure.
Yeah.
About
I don't think my master teacher has used that.
Yeah.
She just will go around the room and be like, oh, this person gets it, and then she'll pull a small group. But for the most part, I don't think would willingly get up and go like a small group.
Yeah. So for reading, for example, if it was something that they had in front of them and could highlight, I might give them highlighters and say, highlight the words that you're not quite sure of yet. So they're kind of having to evaluate, these are the words I'm going to need help with.
Yeah, I'm doing a math, so I did reading last time, so I'm doing math. But I know for like a formal assessment, I want to do, so I'm doing geometry, so I'm thinking of doing like a product where I'm like going to connect art and geometry and have them read from visual something. But if they for like a student self-assessment, the school uses Seesaw a lot, so if they would explain, how they drew a geometric shape on Seesaw at the video recording, is that a self-assessment or is that more like a formal assessment if they're explaining what they did?
So it's very similar to what Dr. Bradford was talking about to highlighting, because if you're doing geographical shapes, so they need to know, perimeter and area and on those, are they going to have to understand and demonstrate that they understand those equations and how to do that?
No, it's second grade. So it's like, this is a square, it has 4 sides, it has, 4 angles, it's going to be a very simple, it's just the intro to geometry, I think, So it's just, I think the 3 lessons is all going to be about 2-dimensional shapes. And then I thought to tie in some sort of art integration. I think sorry, I'm just.
No.
That's okay.
I understand informal and formal assessments. I have ideas for that, but the student self-assessment is what I think I struggle with because I don't know what to use.
Okay, so I'm just thinking off the top of my head, it sounds like you're doing a project-based learning type thing where they're going to create something. And then so you have the steps, maybe you have the overall steps of this project. And that you can ask the students, do you think you might have any, or how do you feel about each of the steps?
Okay.
Maybe what supports you might need for any of these steps. That might be too metacognitive for second grade class. I don't know, I haven't been in a second grade class in a very long time. Okay. So that may be something.
Or the first K of the KWL.
Yeah.
Okay.
What you know is going in, maybe, about shapes.
A couple questions that came in that people are echoing as far as dealing with small groups, and is that going to be an issue, or do they only want the whole class? Because they have one person in PE that does a lot of informal assessment in small groups, and we want special ed that only works in small groups.
So I actually asked that question to the CTC, especially because of our special education candidates. They usually have smaller groups or groups of 3 or 4. And the comment back was, as long as there's enough there are enough students in that group to demonstrate the components of the assignment, that's sufficient. So for example, at the end, you're going to be analyzing 3 different students' work. So one who is met the objective, one who has not quite met the objective, and maybe one who has superseded that objective. So you would have to have a broad enough group to have those 3 components down, or those 3 students present.
Yeah, that answered my question.
Okay. Yes.
So for the student self-assessments, do they need to be 3 separate self-assessments, 3 different types?
Oh, or can you use the same one in each lesson? I think as long as it's a good self-assessment, I don't know that it has to be all varied.
And then I also have another question. In the curriculum, they do give us the opportunity to do student self-assessments, but it's in the form of a questionnaire. Would that be acceptable?
Yes.
Sure. Sure. It doesn't have to necessarily be on the fly. It can be something a little more formalized.
I want to make sure, like, just clarify, so we're doing the 3 lessons, the 3rd lesson is still lesson, and then we do the formal assessment, correct? So
Yes.
3 lessons and then formal assessment.
Yes.
And then based on information, you're going to do another lesson.
Okay.
We're getting ahead of ourselves. But
Yeah, there was
I
a,
want to make sure so the assessment is not in our lesson, that's a whole thing, after we teach 3 separate lessons.
in most lesson plans, there's a place where you're going to indicate the, you know, how you're checking for understanding, how you're doing sort of an informal, even homework would be considered an informal assessment to you. And then usually for a unit, you have what assessments are you going to use along the way. And those are part of your lesson. We can look at the template in a little while to see if there's a box for that. But there is a whole, then there's a whole.
Because you said you wanted the informal student self, but you also want the formal, so I'm wondering if you want the formal in the 3rd lesson, or is it a formal with the whole 3 lessons?
So in my mind, you would have to give enough content to then assess formally. So that would come at the end of the 3rd lesson, possibly.
Yeah, which might incorporate all 3 lessons.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, technically, whether it's a summative or just a formative, you know, we don't think you need to worry about that because the summative is usually over a whole unit. 3 lessons might be a little mini unit. So, but it's not. I don't think you're not filming your students taking the assessment. That's just something that happens afterwards.
That's what I was wondering, so like the 3rd lessons, like somebody wants to film each lesson, and then that 3rd lesson, we're not actually doing a formal assessment. Like we don't technically have to record that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Although it does allude to annotating, providing feedback to students if I'm not incorrect. So
we'll get more
yeah.
to clarify.
Yeah, we haven't even got to the video portion of that yet. There was another question I think that came up online is, are we not planning the 3 lessons, but we're doing a lesson assessing and then planning the 2nd? So no, it's like when do you want to talk about 512
Sure.
and 511?
When anyone remember TSP 511? In TSP? Art of Teaching 2? Okay, in Art of Teaching 2, you created that unit plan. You guys remember that? So we want you to think of it this way. You are creating a sequence of learning events. So you are creating a little mini unit plan or a little, 3 lessons. But you're doing that prior. You're thinking, let's think of understanding what is my end result, right? What is my formal assessment? What do I want my students to do, and how am I going to assess, and how am I going to teach it, right? And so you want to have an idea at the end of these 3 lessons. I want my students to be able to demonstrate this information or this action if you're in PE. Then you work backwards. What are my 3 lessons? But as any good teacher, and you guys are good teachers, after you do your first lesson, you can make modifications, and you should make modifications on your next lesson based on the feedback you're getting by doing lesson 1. And then you can incorporate that into your narrative. how you modified each lesson as you went through. Just like, yeah, that's just, you know, I mean, because the whole idea about this is they want this to be a natural harvest of information. And when you are hired on a contract, you're not teaching, you're not worried about this assessment, you're going to be doing that. And so this is really a mirror reflection of what you'll be doing when you are hired on a contract. You will create unit plans, you will create multiple lessons, and then you will make modifications as you go along day by day. And that's okay. But we don't want you to create one lesson, think about it, and then that night create a whole nother lesson the next day, and then that night we want you to kind of pre-plan what your next 3 or 4 days are going to look like.
Do we go back in and like if we are gonna change something based off of the first lesson, like even though we've already planned it, do we go back in and add that to our lesson plan, or is that something that goes in like the analyzing and reflecting section?
That's probably where I would put it.
Okay, so it doesn't necessarily need to 100% reflect what we actually are teaching in our lesson plan? I mean, if we made those modifications, is what I mean.
You'll have an opportunity to do both because remember, you're going to submit everything all at once. It's not like you're submitting lesson plan 1 to, you know, instructional cycle 2 and then lesson plan. You're submitting everything all at once. So you have the ability to go in and maybe modify your lesson plans and also talk about changes that you made based on the information you received during those multiple days of instruction.
And a question regarding the small groups. I know last time I taught the whole group and then broke them off to a small group and focused with them, and then had the aides have like a modified lesson.
Yep.
So this time around, because I have a lot of students who need hand over hand, you know, and they can't verbalize, you know. So for self-assessment, I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do, because if it's hand over hand, they're not doing the work. So do I take the students that can do it themselves and like work with them as like, you said we need enough students to facilitate the small group. So if I don't have the whole group, is that okay? I can pull the students that will be able to do a self-assessment.
Right, or you could probably indicate that these, I'm working towards teaching my students how to assess their own knowledge or give me that communication as much as possible. At this time, this one student is able to do that, so I'm using this self-assessment with that one student. These 4 students are not able to at this time. I think that would be okay. What do you think? Yeah.
So, and then for your students, it might be eye gazing. You know, are you doing really well? Are you having difficulty? You know, if they can't point, maybe you can look at eye gaze, just bring them down to that level.
Okay.
Question?
Oh, just going back to Carly's question on going back and adjusting the lesson plan and whatnot. If you look at the template for the learning segment, which is like the unit plan, there's actually a little part of the table that says at the completion of lesson 1, based on what you learned as a result of teaching this lesson, what changes, if any, will you make to the next lesson?
Perfect.
So
that's a great
you can
place
go
to
ahead and plan everything.
Yeah.
And then teach it. And then like after lesson 1, you go in and you type like, oh, they didn't get this one part, so like let me adjust that for lesson 2.
I was thinking of the thumbs up and thumbs down. If that was my plan, and I found out day 1 that doesn't work, then then I would be changing it. So that's great. Thank you for giving us that. All right. Okay, so as with everything, they are utilizing the UDL framework. So this is just a reminder, even though in your lessons as you build them, you're going to be thinking about multiple ways of engagement, representation, and expression. So ideally, even with their assessment, you're going to want to have enough variety in those assessments that it's not all multiple choice, it's not all short answer, especially when you have students in the room who are English language learners or who are going to struggle with that kind of thing. So just like you did with your first cycle, you're still having those students in mind, even though you're not naming them, you're still considering how UDL plays into these lessons as well and the assessments. Okay.
So let's contextualize it. So engagement, when I'm looking at this, I'm looking at engagement and I'm thinking about how I'm going to videotape myself doing this lesson. I'm thinking about my first 5 minutes. How am I really capturing their attention? What am I doing as a teacher to activate their prior knowledge, to get them excited about this social studies lesson, or this math lesson, or this PE lesson, or this ELA lesson, or this art lesson? You know, what am I doing? How am I using the information about the funds, what I know about the funds and the knowledge of my students to get them engaged in my lesson? Then in representation, what am I providing for them in terms of depth of knowledge of the language that I want them to use? How am I representing that through literacy? And then what are my expectations for them to show me what they know? And then this is one that if you're in general education, or if you're working with students with neurotypical development, this is something you might not need to think of. But for students, for teachers that are teaching students with disabilities, maybe limited functioning just in terms of their mobility, so then you got to think about what are you doing that allows them to use technology or to show what they do know. You know, how are you modifying your lesson, or how are you modifying your expectations of those students so they can represent what they do know through their actions?
If you need more help with that, the link is to CAST, who is the major source of information related to UDL strategies. So, okay. So our step one is, this is our task at hand. We're going to be using the learning segment template, and that should be a live link if you click it, to develop a series of 3 to 5 content-specific lessons. This, I pulled this from the multiple subjects, so that's why it says English or math. But if you're single subject or world languages, it's your thing there. And it occurs over multiple days. And here's some focus that you need to still think about that I tried to highlight. It doesn't look like it showed up that much. But academic and language development. You're still needing to build that in and to make explicit how you're building academic language for students. You also need to build in the students' use of educational technology. We'll walk through these things in a second. I'm going to stress that this has to be students' use of educational technology, not you using technology like we're doing today. This is me using it, but how are students hands-on with educational technology in their classroom? Yes.
You say technology, you mean like using like the phone, like computer, what do you mean by technology?
It could be, so we're gonna get there in just a second. There's a whole site, but anything that's supporting their learning. It could be a phone, it could be timer, it could be, you know, I'm running laps, or I'm measuring my time, or measuring my heart rate. Are you using any technology to record that, to capture that, to analyze that, something like that?
So for PE,
Yeah.
if you were having them, you know, practice, you know, throwing a football or batting or shooting a basketball, and you can go over it with pictures, you can go over it with words, and you can model it as the instructor. But then, how are the students using assistive technology? If I'm shooting basketball, do I have a mate that's filming me, right, shooting the basketball, so then I can review, oh, hey, I look pretty good, or oh, I was in center. You know, how are they utilizing?
That'd be another example.
Some evidence.
How could they use it, or how are they using it in your specific lesson?
In your lesson, they want to see how they are actually utilizing it. So for PE, this is a creativity stretch.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
So just to clarify, it needs to be within all 3 of the lessons, technology integration.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
What?
Only one video clip of it.
Well, I'm just struggling because I have kindergartners,
Right.
and providing them with 3 things of technology
Yeah.
is going to be an overload. They're going to get distracted with.
I don't think it specified that educational technology needed to be in every
No.
lesson. It needs, you're just demonstrating that you can use educational technology with your group. So if it doesn't really fit in all 3 lessons, I wouldn't force it. But but I would definitely put it somewhere, because that's what we're looking for.
Okay.
I'll get to your question in a second, I saw. Follow up here. Do you guys ever use laptops or Chromebooks in your
iPads.
level? iPads?
We go to the computer lab
Yeah.
once a week,
There
Okay,
you go.
okay.
but it's not necessarily geared toward, because I have to do language arts this time, it's more, they're doing math on the computer.
Okay.
So you're gonna have to figure out how they might be able to use the computer lab for a language arts
Does
piece.
your school have a laptop cart?
For upper grades.
The iPad cart? iPads are so much more friendly for little people, but, okay.
I had a question about, okay, so I teach science, and if my students were to like do a lab, and know it's gonna be one of my lessons,
Yeah.
and like take pictures of the result, would that be in kind of like using the technology right now?
And you can also use the quizzes, you could also use the
Yeah.
Kahoot, you can do things like that.
Okay, but for like quizzes, that would be formative assessment, right?
But you could use it as a formative assessment or informal assessment, but it's also educational technology.
Okay.
You could use it as like a pretest,
Okay.
an just.
Okay, sorry, just another quick thought. Because she has a lot of brain breaks with her projector and the computer, do those count towards technology if it's like a video incorporation? No.
Do you guys have one of those really cool boards where kids can come up and touch?
Yes.
Okay, do you have the ability to embed questions where kids can come up and answer questions by touching?
Like yes or no, and then it gives them
Probably.
feedback. If they're touching it, I think it would count. If it's just projecting and they're
Yeah.
watching passively, it's not.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. And there's some resources we're gonna give you that kind of gives you some examples of what educational technology is too. All right, so this is kind of the flyover, and then we're gonna go into the specifics, okay, and sort of brainstorm and practice them. Okay, the other piece that it needs to have is supporting higher thinking skills. Right, so hold that thought, because we're going to talk about those are in a minute. Include a formal assessment that their understanding of the content through the development of product, process, or performance. You will include your scoring criteria and share the results of the assessment with detailed feedback to the students. All right, so that's how you're planning this lesson. It has to include those things. All right, so what you're turning in is a blank copy of one formal assessment instrument and the scoring criteria or rubric that you've created or comes in your curriculum, and the learning segment template, the contextual information, and the assessment description. Those are all links as well. So the template is your lessons series. The contextual information is very similar, is exactly the same as what you've done before with how did you get to know your students, who are your students, what's their backgrounds, what's their knowledge. If you're using the same students, then it's going to be the same information, and that's fine. It doesn't have to be a new group of students. I'm going to go to the...
You can just copy paste that into the new template, right?
You can. Yes, you can. Right. And for your lessons, you can use your curriculum as well. You just need to cite, where you got it or how you modified it, that kind of thing. And I was going to say something. Forget. So this is what it. Did you?
Yeah.
That's what it looks like. That should look familiar to the first round. It's really the same. And then the assessment description describes the assessment that you're using. Would you do me a favor and hit the links on your PowerPoint, and you can look at that, take a couple minutes to look at that. The link to the template for the planning was on the other page. Sorry. So, also, it was all in a file that I emailed to you earlier this week, on Tuesday, I think. So look through those three things, the template for the lesson, the assessment part, and the contextual information. Good question, yes.
So for the formal assessment, it can't really be a quiz then, because they're asking for their product, process, or performance.
The product could be your quiz. I mean, that is a product they fill out. It has to be something that you're capturing though, not just question answer, you know? Like verbal, it has to be some sort of written piece. Unless you're a special education candidate, then that person can be verbalizing it and you're capturing for them their answers. It can be, you know, it's a modification.
What is she talking about? I'm sorry.
Huh?
I don't know what her question refers to.
Because for the formal assessment, it's talking about they need to either create a product, so like they need to create something, a process would be they're explaining what they're doing, or performance is like a presentation.
Mhm.
So that's why I was asking if a quiz would meet those requirements for number 5.
It's a process. Yeah.
That's a problem, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking.
So if I did like a quizzes for my formal assessment, and I just like printed out what their results would be, that could be my product for my students.
Right. Right. They are each individually doing a quiz
Yes.
that you collect, then that's formal.
And even if it's using the technology, I can just print the
Yes.
results, it doesn't have to be
Yes.
handwritten.
No, right, as long as you can print it out. Yes.
So can we use the performance assessment for our formal assessment? So we have a rubric as the scoring that they have it.
That's correct. Yeah.
All right.
Can we combine elements, as in the formal assessment also be a demonstration of their technology knowledge or using technology?
Yes. Yes. They can use educational technology to do the assessment.
Okay, that would count for both of them.
I think so, yes.
Okay, so for the learning objectives that we're gonna be assessing them on, is it one like overarching learning objective for the whole like mini unit, or is it individual lessons that each have their own learning objective?
So I would break it down to each lesson has its own, although it may carry over. You know, you might not master it in one lesson. Again, I'm thinking of math clearly there. So it depends. So if your objective is so big that it needs to be carried over 3 lessons, then that's fine. Then you'll have one learning objective. If you're doing math and it's really building on each other, you might have a new objective in every lesson. So I don't think it necessarily matters as long as then your assessment, your formal assessment covers all the objectives that you've been teaching for those 3 lessons. And one tip that we got was just because students are writing it down doesn't necessarily mean it's a formal assessment, right? So an exit ticket where they're writing it down is still an informal assessment. Okay, so just to clarify that.
And then one question we had is, are we going to be submitting the actual quiz they took, if that's the type of formal assessment, or are we just submitting the scores?
No, you're submitting the blank assessment and the grading criteria, so the answer key, or rubric. And then you're actually going to be submitting 3 student assessment samples on how students did. Huh? Yes. Right. Right. Huh? Yeah, yeah.
Well, you're going to decide whether that next lesson is going higher or an intervention lesson. So it's not necessarily going to be the intervention lesson. That's your choice.
And for the turning in for those, if we do like, say like Google Form or Google Doc for their quiz, we have the ability to like upload those, or would it have to be maybe like a print and scan?
I would probably do a PDF of it and upload it.
Yeah, because, do not send in the link.
Yeah.
Okay. y'all found the forms that are for you. Now, the ones that are listed here are multiple subject, I apologize. So I don't think they vary too much, but obviously you're gonna use your template for your group that you have received. Okay. Yes?
The one has the step-by player version. Are we still uploading our own?
It's called the learning segment template is where you're uploading, or you're giving information about, yeah.
So we don't need to do actual full lesson plans.
I don't think so. Like, can we go to that one?
Our lesson plan.
Not that one, oh, I see, yeah.
When you register for the test, there's only an option to upload one document. There is a learning segment template. You can upload.
Okay,
Is that
so you've already,
registered?
yes.
Okay, so you're filling this in, this is your lesson plan, essentially, that you're filling out right here.
So here's lesson 1,
Just running like a
lesson 2. What?
I think it's
It's
more
like
like
a summary.
You wanna put it in enough detail that they're understanding why you're making those decisions, but I don't think it's as much detail as your first one.
Yeah.
Because,
Because it even says right there, like what students do, what teachers, what you do, and
it is pretty detailed then.
yeah, but it's not as like, students will do this, teacher will, yeah, but it's just broken into.
It expands, it will expand. Yeah. So that's, and what was brought up earlier is that at the end of each lesson, you have the ability to talk about what you would do differently.
The only thing that frustrates me about this lesson plan template, and I know this is you guys, but I just have to express it. If you go to like the what the students do, what the teacher does, so in a effective lesson plan, you would have those things like
Right next to each other, yeah.
Okay, but this, it's like a text box for what the teacher does for the whole entire day, a text box for what the student does for the whole entire day. How do you link those things? Would you use numbering? Would you put like a 1 and a 1, a 2 and a 20?
I would.
Use just numbering?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, as clear as you can make it, especially since you might not have to have as much detail, you know, if you're linking them. Otherwise, you're gonna have to make it explicit that, you know.
When the teacher.
Yeah.
So it just, yeah, okay. So possible.
Yeah, that seems frustrating, I get it. Yeah, so you're still doing adaptations and accommodations. I noticed that, if you can scroll down, where it says assessment, it has that assessment evidence and assessment of learning, informal, student self-assessment, and formal. That doesn't mean that you have to have a formal, you have to have all 3 of those in every lesson. It's just saying these are what I'm talking about, okay? So, or if you're worried about that, I would just say formal assessment will be completed after lesson 3.
What would you include in the ELD and ALD box? Is I guess my question is, are you describing the English language development and the academic language development?
Yes, that's what I would put there. That's where I put all my.
Just how within the lesson did you address those concepts?
Yes. Does it just say ELD with no other explanation?
ELD and ALD, that's all it says, no parentheses, no anything.
Oh, that's nice.
So I just am a little.
I would assume that that's asking how you're going to address the students' needs for English language development within that lesson.
Okay.
So vocabulary, if it's math, you're really focusing on math vocabulary, PE vocabulary building. Uh-oh. Yeah, yes.
Should we put the ELD like standards for addressing or no? Do you think they would as
You can. Yeah, that would be awesome. Especially if it's an English language arts lesson that has a great ELD component to it that matches, that would be great.
My class I manage 18 of the 22 students are ELs, so every lesson.
So it's already in the brain, yeah, so that would be great. Nice and clear then, that you are focused. Good. Okay, no other questions?
Yes, we have a question.
Well, I just asked.
We did.
Oh, sorry.
I got it. Okay, so those components, you have to address the language arts or the academic language components, the higher order thinking, ed technology, and assessment, obviously. I think that was the 4.
You got time for an online question real quick while he's
Yes.
loading it up?
Yes.
Okay. Do we submit 3 lesson plans or 1 lesson plan and fill out the sections on the form regarding lessons 2 and 3?
You're gonna use that form for all lessons, 1, 2, and 3. Just use the form,
Gotcha.
right? We went to Google's slides. Yeah. Yes.
So if you don't have a technology component in all 3, then you just say you're not using it for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because this is where appropriate, so I guess
Okay.
I assume that they might not do that.
And it might be something like a lot of classes, well, now it's getting better, but a lot of schools have limited technology resources. They might have 3 iPads in their room or 5 computers, a bank of computers instead of a class set of computers. So for me, I would have a rotation through that center so that ed tech would be for one group in the first lesson, second lesson, third lesson, and it would rotate through students. That, or you can rotate through in your lesson, either way. Yes?
So I have to do an ELA lesson this time. So if you whole group reading and they read on their Chromebooks, so if they all read the book before the core read, that would be incorporated technology?
Yes, yes. Or if you used that Chromebook to facilitate the, to differentiate students who maybe can't read all that on their own, but they're listening to part of it, then you're using ed technology in a different way for that student or those 3 students, but you're still using ed technology. So that would be a good demonstration as well. Sure. I did ask this, if your district has purchased some educational technology program, you're free to use that. If it's iReady or RazKids or Spelling City or some sort of embedded technology component to your math curriculum, again, just cite it and show how it links to your lesson, what they're going to be covering in that, then that would be fine. Yes?
How do you cite that kind of thing? You just say, using this curriculum that we're doing.
Yeah, and then maybe the year, as much as of the information you can from the teacher's manual.
You can also run over to OWL Purdue, and because they have a lot of different ways that you can cite different media.
Yeah, that would be
And
the.
I would just go there to see what it means to cite an online source, a published source.
Well, I mean, I understand how to cite things, I just don't know how I'm citing my own curriculum that we're using in my classroom. Like, I use HASP medical biology curriculum. So can I just say, using the HASP medical biology curriculum for my class, we use this lesson or
Do
whatever?
you have a teacher book?
Okay, so that's like something that, where do I cite that? Yeah, it's like, am I putting that in what my response, or am I adding that to the whole full reference at the bottom of my page?
I think you just need to give credit of where you got it. So I would do it in the lesson. So if you're utilizing some of the verbiage from that lesson, then I would cite it right there. You know, the base of this lesson is from the curriculum, and it's been modified for my individual class needs, as you will see the following.
And for science and math, you don't always have to think of your product as your final thing. You can assess their ability to process through a math problem, process through a science lab. So I mean, you do have flexibility that way.
Okay, so here's where you're going to actually begin teaching and recording yourself teaching. You video record all the instruction and assessment activities and strategies as you teach your learning segment. You select and submit clips that show your assessment strategies embedded in instruction. So here's where you're focusing on. If you're teaching a lesson, your clips are going to focus on how you're checking for understanding, how you're facilitating higher order thinking skills, that kind of thing. And here are those 4 items that they're going to be looking for in your annotation of your video clips. So developing academic language, using educational technology, providing context-specific assessment results and feedback to students, and the use of higher order thinking skills.
So when I'm thinking of higher order thinking skills, am I thinking of depths of knowledge?
And Bloom's taxonomy.
Taxonomy, and I'm thinking of the language of the discipline.
Yeah, so right away, it's implementing specific assessment strategies that provide students opportunities to engage in higher order thinking skills. So either in informal ways, I'm going to have thinking of Bloom's taxonomy or depth of knowledge questions. I'm going to be asking some of those higher order thinking questions and be capturing that on film. Or in my assessment product itself, my formal assessment, I'm going to definitely include some of those higher order thinking skill concepts in there. You know, evaluate, apply, huh?
It can be like either or.
Yeah, I would do it in both because it's easy to use some higher order thinking, just questions as you're teaching your lessons and engaging students. That's easier to video record than, although I pointed out in my upload of my assessment as well.
So my learning segment is being taught to first graders who are in special education who have very low thinking.
Yeah.
There really isn't any higher order thinking that they do. So,
Okay.
there's that.
Well, I mean, you may not, they may not have the cognitive tools, the vocabulary that we might be used to individuals using if they're evaluating something or analyzing something. But they may be able to provide you evidence of their analysis or their evaluation of something at their own, their current ability level. Yeah, so you might need to look for ways that you are thinking creatively about how you're getting them to analyze or evaluate.
So if we were looking at like apply, is apply considered a higher order? Because if I'm instructing them and they're applying what they're learning to the activity, could I say that's higher order thinking?
I would point that out, and I would also clarify that for students, for this population of students, that's stretching them to higher order. It's higher for them.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So it's stretching them. I would make that connection. Also, analyze is drawing connection among ideas. The connection could be to self. You know, from what we're learning today, can you think of a time in your life when da-da-da? So that could be a connection to self or connection to another text. Even for little people, they have opinions, about things. And provided it's more challenging when you have students whose communication is so delayed or who's not or nonverbal. That's where we're really going to get tricky.
Yeah, so I think that they want us to not focus in these 2 areas if we're looking at this thing and just try to make our way up this way. Not everyone is going to always have someone create something based on their knowledge and their ability to understand that academic topic. But I think they want to just not focus on recall and ask those lower level Bloom's taxonomy.
Look at evaluate. That's justify a standard decision. So what did you think about this character? What did you think what did you think about that character when they made that decision? What was your opinion of that
So
character?
like specifically mine is a learning segment on blending sounds, like at is a cat.
Yeah.
So when I say they're applying their knowledge of letter sound correspondence to blend or something like that?
Well, could they apply that process? Can you think of a word that you like and then break it down into the little phonemes? So they're utilizing that skill. You're teaching that skill, right? Can I break a word into its individual sounds? And then can they apply that knowledge to a different one? you know?
Okay, so changing them to one word and then you
Because-
apply them to different words.
Yeah, because if they're able to do that, you're showing your students understand transfer. They're transferring knowledge.
That's exactly what I was thinking, transfer, okay, thank you.
Okay, so these are the elements. I would definitely use Bloom's taxonomy or the depth of knowledge. Your academic language, kind of brushed off, how are you gonna build vocabulary, sentence structure, that sort of thing embedded in your lessons as well. And then the use of educational technology, and then how are you gonna give that feedback to students is another piece that you need to think through. And it appears to me that you're videotaping that feedback to students. So,
in terms of like videotaping, so obviously sometimes lessons are not just one day, right? So if we do just
Right.
3 lessons and a quiz, that's a
Yeah.
little like that, right? So would you recommend, like say it's a 5-day span of 3 lessons, recording every single day, just so we have more than enough to take from anything and then develop those 4 annotated clips? Would you recommend that or?
I would, if it's easy enough to do. The other thing that does is that desensitizes you and the students to this videotaping that's going on. If it's an iPad or a computer that's just up and turned around, you have to, if you're moving around in the room, you're gonna have to be a little creative about how that happens, and what support you have to make that happen.
And in terms of the recording, would you, like for, like cycle 1, I had it like kind of stationary in the back.
Yeah.
Like, when I reviewed it, there was difficulties where you might not be able to see what I was doing like on a projector because of like glare and things like that. Do you think that's something that they'll like see as like a negative, or is it like fine that it's stationary in the back?
I think that's fine.
Okay, and so, because like, for cycle 1, I annotated something, and you can't really see it, but the kids are doing it, and I'm talking, and you can hear what I'm doing. But the
And you're
camera just.
explaining it, yeah.
Okay.
What do you think?
I'll get your question in a second, but you made me think of something. I go and I observe a lot of teachers, and this one teacher, she's using overhead, and where I'm sitting in the back, there is a complete glare in the middle of her screen that I don't know that this teacher notices. If I'm a student, I can't see a third of that screen. So watching that, and I don't know if there's anyone else in your classroom, but that may provide feedback for you. Is there something you need to do in terms of dropping the glare for your students just in general? So
That's a good point.
I'm always worried about the sound, right? Because how are we capturing the sound as much as we can?
Yeah, so going kind of off of that, so for my video, I recorded on like a really nice camera, but then when I went to transfer it, it was like too big of a file, so I had to make it smaller, but then it made it like kind of blurry. When everyone else is kind of blurry a little. Okay, so I was like, you could see me, you could hear me clearly, but it wasn't like the clearest video, so that would be fine. They're not gonna be like, it's not clear.
Yeah, they're really looking for evidence, not
So
necessarily.
you can see the
quality.
kids and me, but it's not like as clear as it was, so I had to make it a smaller file.
Yeah, and as long as I could hear you, because if you're blurry, but I could hear you and I could see your actions and I can see that you're engaged in it.
Yeah, part of it was like I would go out of the camera shot and come back in because my teachers didn't move it but that will be fine. I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, but I mean, when you annotate, you have the ability to say at 1 minute 35 seconds, I left screen, but I was doing these elements of what you're supposed to.
Okay.
You had actually sparked a question about the overhead projector. Where I am, I'm in a 4-story building and I'm in the basement, so there's pillars that hold up the structure of the whole building, and I tell the students all the time, I'm sorry, it's just the way the class is, there's somebody not going to be able to see. And so constantly we have students leaning over, and I try to go around the pillars and I dance around the classroom. Do I just try my best to hide that? I mean, what do I do?
No, I mean, that's your reality, that's the
Yeah.
reality of your classroom. I mean, you know, and I think that you could talk into that in your narrative and then how you're trying to accommodate that. I mean, I'm assuming that obviously every single classroom is a fixed space. And I don't know if you have the freedom to move your tables around or not.
Oh, we've tried, even my mentors, there's always gonna be a group of kids not able to see, there's no way around it.
Can they stand and move at all?
Oh,
Or it sounds like they're meeting your needs,
yeah,
they're
they're all
stretching.
like this, and,
Yeah, as long as, I think that might be able to be put into that contextual piece of your classroom,
Okay.
given the environmental issues that are there, if you're worried about it. But yeah, you can't be dinged for those things.
Does that?
It's an awesome building, but it's 4 stories and we're in the basement, so it's,
Yeah.
without those pillars, there'd be no building.
I wanted to give you some resources. This is from the CalTPA site, and the assessors wanted us to make sure to let you know that there's all these resources that are there from Q. Q is Computer Using Educators, and they provided lots of resources to you to help you look at educational technology and its use. So there's some lessons, there's some videos that demonstrate some strategies and resources for you all to take a look at. So we have a little bit of time right now. I'd like you to go ahead and go there just to make sure you can get there. And check out some of the resources and explore some educational technology that you may or may not be as familiar with, since that's one focus in here. So we'll take 5 minutes to do that. on that. Anyone want to share what they found? One of the things that we're highlighting, the use of technology to build vocabulary. So that kind of kills two birds with one stone there, if you think about it. For building academic vocabulary for our EL students, that would be of a benefit to them, as well as using the ed tech to do that, or through quizzes or some other things. That's not necessarily your formal assessment, but it's maybe it's a pre-assessment or it gives information to students about vocabulary to front load the lesson, would be an example. In a flipped classroom, if we had students, if you're in an area where students have access to technology at home, you could even build that into your lesson if they're doing that component at home. We had a one-on-one iPad where they were able to take those home, so you could assign technology homework assignments and get that results prior to your lesson. So that was really nice. Someone share what they found or how helpful was that, those resources, or you didn't have enough time to delve in. How many of you are using technology in your classes right now? Okay. So that's easy if you're already using it, you're seeing it's modeled. Good. Good. What are your favorite uses currently, Ben?
Let's see, we use iReady
Uh-huh.
to diagnose students in the learning lessons.
Yeah.
And then they also use Google Slides for their reading responses that they're showing to the teacher.
Okay, so you can see, they can share with each other. I used iReady as well for ELA and math. It took me a couple of years to figure out, I can go in and assign specific lessons that are targeted to the thing that I just taught that day. So it wouldn't be just, oh, they're working on their own, because iReady will give them a lesson, but you can manipulate that. So it's related to the multiplication lesson or the finding the theme or whatever lesson you're working on. And then that gives me great information about, it's supporting their learning that we're doing, but it's also giving me kind of a score for their work. Not the formal stuff, but informal. Yeah.
Just to touch on educational technology, just to share a resource, if you go to education.com/games, it's like standard-based educational online games. So like you type in the standard and like it's mostly elementary related. I don't know how applicable it would be to higher developing students, but just if you have like a language standard or a math standard, you type it in and it's going to give you an educational game that is addressing that standard.
Perfect.
So education.com/games.
Great. Yes.
And just kind of going off of that, I know for in the Anaheim district, they have My Math, the curricula, and part of that resource is they have like games that, and also like tools like base 10 blocks on through the My Math. So I don't know if your school uses that's the My Math curriculum by McGraw or something like that. So use that.
Great. So online manipulatives, those are a little less messy than actual ones, right? Play with them as much. Okay.
They can't get lost.
Yeah, can't lose them. Yes.
Can you do something like Kahoot to do like a introduction to vocabulary? Do you think that would be like if it was like just vocabulary words in Kahoot as like a free?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Definitely.
Yes. So I think the whole idea is that the kids are doing something. The kiddos are doing something, and I think that they don't want to be prescriptive of what it looks like. They just want to make sure that kids are touching and playing with and utilizing educational technology, and they want to leave the expertise and how that's done up to you guys. And because I guarantee you, if you have a PowerPoint and you're doing a PowerPoint and you are using educational technology, most likely you'll probably get a 1, because the kids are doing nothing. they're just banking your information, right? They're not engaging, they're not doing anything. But as soon as you get the kiddos to do something with something, now we're talking.
Okay, so for step 2, which is your actual teaching of that lesson, you're going to be turning in the annotated video clips. You're going to be submitting the informal and formal assessment pieces. So let's take a look at this. That's our informal and student assessment template. So question 1 is, how did you use informal assessment results to learn about the student's academic language development, and how did you adjust your instruction based on these results? How did your in-the-moment informal assessment give you the opportunity to provide feedback to students to help them understand? So someone was just asking about that videotaping feedback piece. That's where I think it fits most appropriately, is in that informal piece. So as you're assessing, you're checking for understanding, students are going to answer, and then you're going to give feedback that you can videotape because it's part of your lesson. Helping them to understand what they need to do next to continue progressing toward or beyond meeting the learning goals. How did you adjust your instruction based on these results? How did student self-assessment results provide insight about students' own understanding of the goals? And how did you adjust your instruction based on that?
So, a lot of our informal assessments, informal stuff is really like basically what that second box is, like in the moment informal assessment.
Yes.
Will we write that down as our informal assessment for our lesson, or is something like an exercise like that?
No, you could write down how you're going to be checking for understanding, or how you're going to be checking that they can do something, and then what that feedback might look like. And in addition, that you're going to videotape that feedback to show them.
Okay, so as I noticed a couple of you guys doing some.
Yeah.
We could use that in the moment assessment that you guys are talking about.
Yeah.
And then that would be fine for informal assessment.
Yeah, and someone asked that online, and so when you're videotaping, you kind of want to make sure that gets captured on the videotape.
Okay.
So if your videotape's way over there and you're over here with this group, so how do you guys feel about how you're doing? So.
Yeah, my math is you walked around and you made sure everything talked to them.
Yeah. So, I mean, since your final assessment's going to be performance-based, it makes sense that your informal is also checking that performance as you go along, and then giving them specific corrective feedback to fix that. Yeah.
I have a question on the annotations. I know they're kind of brief, right? Because there's like a word limit.
Right.
But is it, do you think that every moment of that clip of 5 minutes needs to be annotated?
No, I don't think so. I haven't been on the assessor end to see that. Do you have any?
So
you just want to make sure you hit all of those pieces.
There are certain components that you need to annotate, and you need to annotate something for every single video that you submit. But you don't need to necessarily address all the components of what you do need to annotate for every single video segment that you submit. But you need, and I believe there's 3 components you need to annotate and talk into, and they have to be done within the constellation of your videotapes.
But do you think it's better to like
over annotate?
Yeah, almost. Yeah.
So yeah,
maybe.
because you guys have access to the rubrics, right? Because you're, it's a 1 through 5. No.
It's in that overview, Pete. It's in the overview.
Yeah, it's in that really long, 50-page packet. You keep scrolling down.
Oh, yeah,
it is. Where it can essential question.
So on Tuesday, I sent out cycle 2 documents to everybody. So it's in that.
It's like a 50-page packet at the very end.
Okay. All right. Good. All right, so then you're gonna be doing the reflection, yes.
Sorry, just a quick
That's
question about the videos. Because I enrolled yesterday for cycle 2, and when I clicked on the teach and assess, like the video clips, it looks like there's 4 sections, like 4 video clips you have to do. And my understanding was, like last time we had to do a beginning clip, a middle clip, and an end clip.
Yeah.
This time it's not looking like it's like that. Is there, like what are we looking for in that first video? Each of the 5-minute segments, if that makes sense.
Let's go back here a second. Okay, so it's these, well, you're gonna be annotating for these 4 things.
Because when you click on it, it's like instruction and assessment of academic language, student use of educational technology,
right?
Instructional and informal assessment, and instructional and student self-assessment. So are those the 4 things you're looking for? Like each video has to address 1, 2, 3, 4. That's right. Thank you.
And there's also like all 4 of the videos have to, like, with all of it. It's not in each video.
No, so when you go to upload video 1, you can only pick one of these 4 titles. So there's 4 videos, so let's say I upload video 1, I can only choose the title of Developing Academic Language, Education Tech, Feedback to Students. No, excuse me, so there's the four things, yeah, it only lets you pick one of those 4. So each time you annotate, you can go in and say, I did all of these things throughout all of them if you wanted to.
And I know that you're also having to videotape your reteach.
Yeah, that's another one. I just saw that it said 4 files, so I was a little confused on like if I was filming beginning, middle, and end, or what I was making sure I needed to record myself doing essentially. Thank you.
Okay, so in the reflection, now's where you're actually analyzing your students' assessment or their product, process, or performance using that scoring criteria. So this is really looking at that formal assessment piece, and you're summarizing the students' results for the whole class, and then you're submitting 3 student formal assessment responses. You're looking for a student who exceeds the learning goal, a student who met the learning goal, and a student who has not yet met the learning goal. Reflect on what you discovered about students' learning based on your analysis of the informal and formal assessments, including the student self-assessment. Describe what was most and least effective about your teaching and assessment, as well as a target for increasing your instructional effectiveness in the future. Okay, so you're looking at assessment then and analyzing it, and then figuring out what you would do next time. So here's what you're turning in. You're uploading 3 assessments as outlined, detailed scoring criteria feedback to those students. So obviously that assessment that you're going to send up to them will have some feedback on it from you written down. Either it's the scored rubric and maybe some comments, or it's their math test with some tips, some examples, some feedback to improve their assessment in the future. Okay, so this is what it looks like, that template. You list your learning goal and how many of your students would fit in those 3 categories: exceeds, met, or has not quite met. And then you're answering these questions. What was effective? What was the least effective? How would you change it for next time? Yeah, I think it's just one long title. Question about that?
On that form again, on the actual document.
Yeah.
There's could you go up a little bit?
The chart.
Yeah, so there's step 1, content specific learning goals. There's just 3 of those, in one assessment, I guess.
They're not necessarily.
Okay.
I mean, there could be more Or there, it says add rows if you need to, but there could be fewer or more.
Okay.
It depends on what you were going for in your lesson. I might break them up so that students could see like I was teaching theme, that's pretty big. You know, what are the steps that you need to do in order to get there and make those smaller objectives, so that I could see where students were, what pieces of that they were getting. Okay. So that's up to you, but okay. Questions about what you're uploading there? Okay. And then here's your reply based on your analysis of how your assessment went. You're going to either reteach an activity to a group of students that didn't demonstrate competency yet, or you're going to build an extension activity for those who have met the objective to extend their understanding further on. So it's either enrichment or remediation kind of thing. And then describe your plan for reteaching activity and video record that reteaching or extension activity and submit one video clip that demonstrates how you adjusted your instruction or built your instruction if it's extending. Okay. You want to go to that. Oh, and so what you're turning in is this form and an annotated video clip. So briefly describe the activity, including the use of educational technology as appropriate, or how it will develop or extend understanding or skill, rationale for choosing that activity. So citing based on which part of your assessment, so tying it to because my assessment showed that I chose this activity, so again tying it together. Informal assessment during activity to check for students' understanding during that activity. How are you going to make sure they're getting it this time around or extending? And how are you going to adapt or accommodate for students that allows either deeper engagement or to facilitate their understanding?
So there's 5 clips that you're submitting, 4 that highlight those topics, and then
that I'm not sure. Anyone who's registered, is there space for just 4 or 5?
Repeat the question.
So she asked, does that mean there's 5 clips for your, yes,
Correct.
Okay, good.
There's separate sections. There's a section that will allow you to upload the 4, and then you're gonna go to a different part of the assessment of the Pearson, and it's gonna be like extended.
At the end,
Or
so apply.
5 total clips.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Questions about that? Okay, and then this is just a warning for those of you who are multiple subjects. I don't want anyone to fall in this category. This is from their assessment. Multiple subjects candidates must demonstrate both literacy and math within the CalTPA. So if the first cycle you did math, the second cycle you must do literacy. If you do not do both, you will not pass. So that's an automatic, didn't pass. So you can't do 2 math lessons. I mean, you can't do math for cycle 1 and math for cycle 2. You can't, or literacy for both. You have to switch it up. Yes, and if you're doing special education, you're doing multiple subject primarily, probably, and so that would be the same for y'all too. Okay. All right. Questions? I think that's the end. Oh, and just back up all your files. For sure. Okay.
Yeah, and don't delete. If you videotape everything and you decide to use one videotape and then you submit something, and let's just say on the unfortunate event it comes back and you did not do so well and you need to adjust your work for resubmission, then their feedback was indicating that maybe the video that you selected was not the best or it didn't show this. And then when you go back, if you've deleted all your other videos, you don't have the opportunity to go look at other things you've already done and say, oh, wait, I really did that in this one. why did I select that in the first place? Okay, I'm gonna use this evidence now. So it's not when you remediate, you have to go out and do something new. You may be able to use stuff you already have,
Possibly.
possibly.
In your videos, you know, you can't put music or edit. In my video for my thing, my students are very bad, and so there's a lot of profanity in my video. Are they just gonna overlook that? Because I mean, you can hear in the video, it's just like, language, no cussing, watch yourself. So like throughout the video, it does show, you can hear it, but just leave it.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's nothing else you can do about it.
Okay.
Yeah, they're not looking at any of
So
that.
they're just gonna look past that.
Yeah.
Okay. 'Cause yeah, and then the whole clip you just hear it, and it's like very, I mean, what does that do? Okay.
Again, is that something you can put in the context?
Well, I
Yes.
annotated in there that
Yeah,
we have a behavioral issue with the students in the class, and
Yeah.
so this is how they act out, and like that.
This is what it is. Okay, other questions?
For the video clip, do you need to plan another lesson as well? Or, I mean, like, obviously you're planning it for teaching a class, but do you submit another lesson?
No, you're just submitting that form that describes that activity.
And then you need to make sure the video really captures what you're doing different. How you're addressing what the student, how you change your pedagogy to address what the students didn't capture, or how you're taking the standard and extending it above and beyond.
For the videos, I know that you need to like demonstrate the like informal assessments and self-assessments, but you do not need to videotape the formal assessment, right?
I mean, you have to have like the student samples.
Well, yeah.
You're showing evidence, but not in video.
Yeah.
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 What is
It takes
formal?
like a whole class period.
Yeah, it could be a whole 55-minute class period.
Yeah.
Here's a video of students.
Question here.
So for the reteach, if like only a handful of students didn't get it, we can reteach a small group and have like other students. I know my class does like ST math, so I could just videotape me teaching the small group and then
Absolutely.
let them know what the other students are doing so they understood it.
And that's a part of, and pointing out that that's part of what you're doing differently, is you're providing a stronger ratio
So
to your
the
feedback.
reteach can be a small group, it doesn't be the whole
Yeah,
class.
no.
Okay.
Right,
Yeah.
it probably will be.
So you would indicate that on the form.
Okay.
Okay. That's all we have. If you don't have any other questions about cycle 2, then you're done. And if you have questions about cycle 1, you can just kind of hang back and we'll take those too. How's everyone feeling?
Just one quick question. I know last session it was kind of brought to the attention that when we're turning in our CPAs and whether or not that deals with graduation, and I need to bring that up again.
That's okay.
Has there been any news on whether what that entails, and if we turn it in, if we get our results back by December 20th, even though graduation is December 15th?
So your submission, your ability to get your results back and walking through ceremonies, those are two different things.
Perfect, that's all I needed.
So your credential may post after, your master's may post after, based on getting the assessment results back, because for the unfortunate event, you might have to remediate, that which is prolonged. When you can apply for your credential and now prolong your overall master's degree posting.
Perfect, thank you.
So kind of piggybacking off that, so I'm under the impression that we have to submit the cycle 2 as how do I say it? We have to submit it as long as we're enrolled, correct? So if I submit, so this is my last quarter, and I'm completely done. So if I choose to submit December 13th, and the quarter ends December 14th, I'm still technically enrolled, even though I won't get my scores till January 3rd. it'll just prolong my posting of my credential and, but since I'm intern, it's not necessarily like a concern, right?
Right. On the system has set up, and we have our own expectations as APU.
Yeah.
Pearson, they have their own system where people can submit 24/7, 365. And then they have a guideline, if you submit by this date, you're gonna get results on this date. And so for us, we want you to submit while you're enrolled. Yeah, but then we give you specific deadlines to go by, but let's just say someone in here or someone listening online has not submitted instructional cycle 1 and they're stressed out about that. Don't stress. You can literally submit both, I'm not promoting this, but let's just say life is happening and you're doing both at the same time right now. You could, on December 1st or whatever, you can submit instructional cycle 1 and then 2 seconds later submit instructional cycle 2. Yeah.
But in terms of like APU's aspect, right, because that's the focus.
Yeah, during clinical
Person,
practice.
whatever, but for APU, as long as it's submitted as we are enrolled, because I'm not enrolling in spring, because I'm done.
Right.
So,
It's for, you're to submit cycle 1 into a
As
clinical practice.
yes, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's, because I'm getting my scores till January 3rd, that's not going to affect. The only thing it'll affect in APU would be my posting of my degree credential.
We get a report on who is submitted. Yeah, so we'll be able to double check.
And then worst case scenario, say I have to pass, there's that 8-week option, right? Like after, once you're done, you have that extra 8 weeks if you need to redo.
If you need remediation, if you need to redo, then yeah, that's a different conversation about what happens at that next term.
So the scoring is 1 through 5, is this second TPA still, we just need a 2?
1 through 5, you needed to, yeah, you're allowed 1-1.
What?
It's a 2 across the board, but you can get 1 in one of the areas.
You can only get 1. You have what? 9 areas, 9 rubrics for instructional cycle 2. So within one of those areas that you're getting the rubric on, you're allowed 1-1. But and 2 is the cut score. But to be honest, and like I'll talk about the educational technology one. If you don't use educational technology and you're just using a Prezi or PowerPoint, you most likely probably will get a 1 on that aspect, right? But as soon as students are doing it, you're moving beyond that. So I really think that if you're putting the effort into it, you will not even come close to getting the points.
My question was in terms of getting your results back. I don't know if you guys have seen what it looks like, but do you get it? Okay, I was gonna say, do you get it back and it's like the C sets where it's like pass or fail, or is it you get it back and you're gonna get like a rubric and like all these things? You know?
That second thing, we're gonna get back the rubric and we're gonna get it back. Okay. They were just submitted. We're not expecting to get back results for 5 weeks for instructional cycle 1, 3 weeks for instructional cycle 2. So we're still anticipating those results for instructional cycle 1 to come back. But what we've been told is we're going to get back individualized rubrics and actual feedback on how students have done for each of those individual rubrics. So
whether you pass or fail, you should still get back.
Yeah, you're getting it all
I
back.
don't remember which test it was, whether it was the CSET or the RICA, but one of them, if you got back information, it means you failed or something. But if you got back just a pass, then you passed. Like,
Do they give the rubrics even if they passed? Probably because there's a score.
Regardless of the overall score, we're getting rubrics and content back, feedback back.
Is that you or us too?
Well, that's a,
You can select to have your results.
Yeah, they
emailed
said
to you.
they pick do you want your results emailed to you? So I think how
So
it's that where they'll shoot you an
So they're
email.
getting the same thing that we
I'm
do.
assuming that we're all getting, because you would want, I'm assuming you're gonna get the same results we are. You
And
know,
then we pass that information on to our credential analysts.
Right.
It's like for all these state tests that we've been having to take, even though you select APU to send it to, we've been having to, we have to prove to people that we passed it, even though like we sent it to APU. So it'll probably be the same for this, like I'll still have to send my credential in and the results? No. Okay,
Let's go up in DRF or anything.
okay.
Sure.
Questions? Who has been dying to ask a question and hasn't? Because your question may be the same question that someone else wants to ask but doesn't want to.
A reminder while they're thinking. If you're a special education candidate and for some reason you do not pass cycle 1 or 2, you will not submit back to Pearson. You will be remediated in-house. Okay, because the potential problem could be it's related to the size of your class or the nature of your class, not your instructional skill, since it's a general education assessment in general.
So if you're going to be taking classes in the spring and life happens, it's okay to continue taking the cycles into spring? Or no, you need to finish them while you're doing your student teaching theoretically, even though?
Yeah, we would like you to finish them.
Okay.
So I had a question again, I just wanna, I pushed back my master's classes until the spring, and I have a sub permit, so I'm just planning on submitting my second TPA December 13th. So all that will do is push back when I get my credential, basically, it won't affect, okay.
No, as long as you're still within the term, you've still submitted both cycles in the term, you're fine. All right, questions about cycle 1? Anybody here have burning questions about cycle 1?
For cycle 1, it's literally you're just repeating yourself over and over and over again, just read.
Yeah, yeah. It's probably like that in here too, yeah.
How I'm saying it.
Yeah, it's a lot of repetition. And this one will probably be the same. Somewhat.
It's like 6 questions on the same thing.
Yeah. Yes.
What?
No, I was just trying
Oh, okay. In cycle 1, because I'm turning into a little bit, so they ask a lot about culture and linguistic resources and funds of knowledge, right? Can you give some examples as to what that would look like or how we would use that in the classroom or for our focus students?
Or how you would capture that?
Yeah, I guess, because I guess maybe just the wording throws me off a little bit, it's a little bit of a fancy term. So like, what does that?
The funds of knowledge piece? Is that what you mean?
It's under like whole class and it's under each focus student.
Yeah.
So what would that, like what, if I had to write, what would I write there? I guess.
So looking at their cultural background, what do they bring to the table that you're gonna want to accentuate or use to your benefit?
So it's like making connections to.
Yeah, to their area of interest, their culture, or recognizing that based on their culture or their socioeconomic status, they may not have they may have limiteds in their funds of knowledge. So for example, I taught in Norwalk and I had students who've never been to the ocean.
Yeah.
And they live right close. You might assume that they live so close they've been. But so when I'm looking at a lesson, I have to think about, will they understand the references in this text? Will they, or will they have a lot, so when I pick a text that they have more background knowledge about, if they are culturally really, like in our area, there was a lot of value in Hispanic cultures. I might use some of that text intentionally, and then I might use another text for a different group of people, just to extend their knowledge. But in the individual students, I had a lot of students who it's difficult to engage them, but to engage them around a topic that they were interested in, they had very narrow focus of interest, so I use it to my advantage.
Thank you.
Yeah, because going back to the UD lesson, multiple means of engagement, representation, and action and expression. So if you were discussing something about the ocean and trying to get them engaged, and you know that no one's been to the ocean, then you're going to provide some sense of prior knowledge or some sense of connection to something that you're teaching. And then,
or build it in, show picture, videos.
Representation, how are you pre-teaching, key vocabulary words. So it's quite often, the whole thing about funds of knowledge is that we just don't want to assume that everyone knows everything that we know.
And they may have knowledge that we don't have. So sharing that and valuing their particular cultural knowledge would be another aspect of being inclusive.
That's a huge aspect, yeah.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming out.